Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Man Mouth, and welcome to Friday Night with the Motor City Man Mouth and the X-Man, who is across from me. How you doing, Xavier?
Doing well, Scott. It's going to be a great night for us here tonight. We're going to dish out some of the hottest and spiciest entrees we've ever dished out in this kitchen tonight.
Yeah, and if you want a little controversy, we can call it controversy the equivalent to a filet. Don't get me started with the food thing. I'll get too hungry. I don't know whether or not macaroni and cheese and a few nuggets would work out, but we will be talking about some nuggets a little bit later. Okay, pun intended, for sure. So with that said, okay, what happened to the LA Clippers? I know what didn't happen.
They turned into the LA Flippers. That's what happened. The LA Clippers turned into the LA Flippers, and as far as Clippers go, I don't want to hear about them again in any reference unless we're talking about a barber with clippers in his hand to do some nice haircuts. The atrocity that were the Los Angeles Clippers. I thought that this series would have ended in 5 games because after game 4, I thought Kawhi Leonard is breaking the will of the Denver Nuggets. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, the Clippers aren't Utah. They have more experience on their team than that. They have a championship head coach. They have a championship superstar. They're not Utah. They're not one of those up-and-coming teams. And I thought for sure in Game 5 the Clippers were going to put them away. And the Clippers went up by double digits in that game, only to lose the game to the Denver Nuggets. I'm like, okay, they're going to have another shot in Game 6, and they're going to put them away. Same story happens in Game 6. Clippers are up by double figures all the way into midway into the third quarter, and then the Denver Nuggets start coming back. At one point in Game 6, the LA Clippers were up by 21 points in that game. And then at some point in the third quarter, the Denver Nuggets cut it down to as little as 6 points. And I started to get a little tight because I'm like, oh, okay, see, this is exactly what happened in Game 5 here, and this team is starting to come back. And lo and behold, the Denver Nuggets come back and not only win that game, they win it by double digits. And I was speaking to one of my coworkers on Sunday when that game was played, Scott, and I told him, I said, and this was before the game concluded, I said, if they go to a Game 7, I'm picking the Nuggets to win the game because they have all the momentum now on their side. And I understand that that's Kawhi Leonard over there, that's Doc Rivers over there. Don't get me started on the act that is Paul George. I've never trusted him in these playoff games, in these situations whatsoever. He had some nice moments in Indiana, but he also had some huge meltdown moments in Indiana too.
Right.
And lo and behold, Game 7 came. The Clippers never really had full control of that game. And the Denver Nuggets, by the fourth quarter, towards its conclusion, they absolutely blew that team out of the building. And it had social media into a frenzy. And I just don't know what to say right now to the LA Clippers, just besides the fact that I'm very disappointed in them. Scott, I don't like to put my trust into people to do things that I expect them to do, and then they end up not getting the job done. I picked the Los Angeles Clippers to win this year's NBA championship because I thought that they had the deepest team there was. I thought that they had a team full of guys that had that real dog mentality that you want your guys on the team to have.
Right.
And those dogs turned into puppies against a Denver Nuggets team that has never won anything. But I will bring this back to everyone's memory. Last season, the Denver Nuggets were just one game away and a few possessions away from actually advancing to the Western Conference Finals in a Game 7 against the Portland Trail Blazers. So it's not like they had not been battle-tested into the second round of the playoffs before, but you just didn't expect a team with a guy like Kawhi Leonard leading the way to go down the way that they went down. And I'm going to go as far as saying that that is the worst choke job in NBA history, just because of the fact that not only did they lose 3 straight games, they were up by double digits in all 3 of those games at one point, only to lose those games, almost all 3 of them, by double digits. Absolutely no excuses. And this is the team that when they acquired Kawhi Leonard and Paul George last offseason,
right,
they started saying things like, we and not me, clearly referring to the Los Angeles Lakers having LeBron James and the ego that comes with LeBron James and all of that. Opening night, Kawhi Town, and hey, Clippers Nation, it's going to be a great night and it's going to be a great season. All of this hype that went into this LA versus LA matchup only for the team that you expected to be in that matchup to not end up being in that matchup. Just an absolute atrocity and embarrassment, and the frauds that are the Los Angeles Clippers. And I said it after Game 7 was over, and I'll say it here again. Steve Ballmer should have made the team walk back to LA from the NBA bubble. I don't care how many miles it was. There was absolutely no excuse for that meltdown to happen the way that it did. And I don't want to hear anybody else say anything about Paul George. Paul George is not the guy that some people thought he was. Right. I haven't trusted him since the 2018 playoffs against the Utah Jazz, where he was served up by Joe Ingles. No disrespect to Joe Ingles, but he's no star in the league. And he gave Paul George all types of trouble in that game. Right. And Paul George in these Game 7s, this is what I expected. Paul George in Game 7s, it goes all the way back to 2013. Remember this, Scott? The Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, the Pacers had Miami on the ropes. And in that Game 7, Paul George did not show up as LeBron James and Dwayne Wade led that Miami Heat team to the third consecutive NBA title and to third consecutive NBA championship appearance en route to their second straight NBA Finals appearance, where ironically they were playing against the San Antonio Spurs that had a fourth young star on the team at the time named Kawhi Leonard.
Right. Boy, how history has a tendency to work itself out. So since you gave me your version of a history lesson, let me give you my version of a history lesson, okay? Number one, everybody that thought that Kawhi Leonard was going to walk in here and do a Theo Epstein, wins a championship of the San Antonio Spurs, works miracles with the Toronto Raptors, playing 62 games, played some great basketball in the postseason, and tell you what, they ended up winning a championship in Toronto, but he had a much better supporting cast in Toronto than he did with the Clippers, and Nick Nurse did a phenomenal job working him in and out of the lineup all year, and during the playoffs, that's when Kawhi Leonard stepped up his game. So to me, had Kawhi Leonard have won it with the Clippers, and I'm putting him in Theo Epstein territory, who happened to break a huge drought with the Boston Red Sox, then pulls off the impossible with Joe Madden and does it with the Cubbies. That's some incredible territory. You know, Kawhi wins with the Clippers, the Raptors, and he wins with the Spurs, where Theo Epstein did it with the Red Sox and the Cubbies. But that said, okay, let's take things and look at the NBA, the LA Clippers. I agree with you. It is the worst choke job I've ever seen, and they are the worst franchise in NBA history. I'll tell you why. They couldn't make it to their first conference finals. In 50 seasons, okay, they've only made the playoffs 15 times, and their all-time record is 1,659 wins, 2,383 losses with a .410 winning percentage. Want to make it more interesting, Xavier? It only gets worse. They've only won 2 division titles in 50 years.
Let me stop you right there momentarily if I can. Because here's where the part of this decade that we're coming out of in particular comes into play right here, when you bring up those 2 division titles. This is a team that, take this year's team out of it. At one point, just a little close to a decade ago, this team had Chris Paul in his prime, Blake Griffin in his prime. Right. DeAndre Jordan was up and coming. And they had so many other great young players around them. And ironically enough, they could not win the division every single time that they had that trio on the floor. They went to the playoffs every year that they had Chris Paul on the roster. But the fact that they could not win the division already tells you enough as it is of the dark cloud that is over that franchise. Please continue.
All right, no problem. That's fine. So let's talk about the LA Clippers. Where did they go back? Well, first of all, they were the expansion team with the Buffalo Braves, 1970 to 1978. I know where you were not. Do you? And I said not. Alive. Okay. 3 playoffs appearances in 8 seasons, and they were led by future Hall of Famer Bob McAdoo. Not only did he have a good career on the court, although I don't want to reminisce about his days as a Detroit Piston, and arguably the worst trade ever when Dick Vitale got run out of the NBA because he made that trade with the Boston Celtics. Not going there, but Bob McAdoo, okay, 3 playoffs appearances with the Buffalo Braves back in the day when they played in upstate New York. Now, think about it. This is a franchise which controversially relocated to LA without NBA approval, and when they were the San Diego Clippers, and they're the oldest franchise to have never played in the NBA Finals. So think about it. They won't have a number one draft choice until 2027 because of that Paul George trade. Everybody talks about when you make a mistake with a quarterback in the first round, it sets you back 5 years. I'm not saying that Paul George wasn't worth a good haul, and that's what it took for Kawhi Leonard to sign there. I realized that there were the old buddy, let's join everybody else here instead of build a team the old-fashioned way you earn it, as E.F. Hutton would say. But think about it. This is a franchise that has a myriad of mistakes that goes back for a long time. Let's take it a step further, okay? What about Donald Sterling, okay? Here's a person here that got run out of the league by Adam Silver because he made controversial remarks. Not going to get into the story, but when you get run out of the league and you're forced to sell, well, everybody can tell you Donald Sterling went through a lot of coaches, and he had some pretty good coaches back in the day when Bill Fitch and Larry Brown were actually coaches there, and Larry Brown actually won with that team for a while. I won't get into specifics because it's not relevant to what we're talking about tonight.
Not only that, Scott, I want to bring up one other person into play in all of this when it comes down to Donald Sterling's history with that organization when he was the owner of that franchise.
Sure.
He had a great all-time NBA player that was sitting in his front office for a great deal of time, too, that being the great Elgin Baylor.
Right. Yeah, he did. No, I know. I remember that. And, again, they've had good people in that organization. They haven't fared well there. But, again, you have Jack Nicholson over Billy Crystal. Is that the old celebrity thing out in L.A.? When they first played at the L.A. Sports Arena and then ultimately moved over to the Staples Center. And I know that Steve Ballmer is going to build him a new stadium that I believe is set to open in 2024 next to SoFi Stadium, another beautiful palace there. That'll be for down the road. But when you think about the Clippers in general, they've definitely have a good coach in Doc Rivers. No question about it. Doc won, with the Celtics, had a good team over there, and he's always been a well-respected NBA name. But when you think about the history of futility with this franchise, and again, we've already alluded to that before, I thought the franchise in Buffalo could have worked out, but I know there were extenuating circumstances that forced them to ultimately relocate to San Diego and then subsequently to Los Angeles. But, I love Kawhi Leonard. Them getting knocked out of the playoffs is not an indictment against him. Kawhi Leonard, to me, is a future Hall of Famer. What he's done, do I think that he's a miracle worker that ultimately gets the Clippers there? I don't know about that. I really don't. There's such a bad culture with that organization. Too much talking throughout the year. Remember, we go to the NBA bubble for a moment, all right? What happens? Well, the Lakers are not going to play. Well, guess what, Clippers? You're not going to play anymore anyways. So go home. You want a real bad punishment? I'll tell you what. You ever taken I-10 across to the West Coast before? Have you ever driven that?
No, I have not.
I have, okay. I've taken it from through Florida all the way to Phoenix. Didn't quite make the 4-hour drive to L.A., but, how would you like 20 hours of driving or 20-plus hours in Texas alone? Not much less the other states in between. That'd be punishment for my worst enemy.
Yeah, I'll pass on that.
Yeah, you're a smart man, Xavier. You don't become a legendary figure because you were able to walk I-10 several hours, because that's a tough drive for an individual. I mean, when I relocated from Phoenix to South Florida, I had to take I-10. Best part about it is it's a direct route. The worst part about it is it's a long route that takes you 2.5, 3 days just to get along one interstate. Of course, nowadays when I do it during the pandemic, well, if it means staying away from COVID-19, I might. But when you talk about bad runs in pro sports, everybody will talk about the Detroit Lions. The last time they won a championship was in 1957. And here's an irony for you, X-Man. I know how I know when the last time they won a championship, 1957. It was on my birthday, December 29th, 1957. My problem was I wasn't born 5 years later, but I remember the date. It's a good trivia question for those people back at home. I never got to see him win one, but boy, I have a date that's really remember. But then William Clay Ford, another individual who, again, I don't think he's as bad as Donald Sterling. I don't think anybody can be as bad as him anyways, but The one thing I'll say about William Clay Ford, he's always been patient with his coaches. Did he necessarily make the right hire? Of a story, not time to mention it. And if he ever left the Lions head coaching situation, never got hired again because there was so much patience. I don't think he hired the right people, but never did William Clay Ford ever threaten to leave Detroit if he didn't get a brand new stadium. And the Clippers have certainly been anything but stability. So when we talk about the Clippers being knocked out, let's look ahead now, because I agree. To me, they are the worst franchise in professional sports. A couple other ones that stand out. The Lions haven't had a good track record lately, but another one that I would put in that category would be the Arizona Coyotes of the National Hockey League. They're horrible too. We won't get into that one, but they've never even made it to an NHL Stanley Cup final either. Who knows when they will anyhow. And for the longest time, they played in horrible arenas dating back to the America West Arena. They're fighting with the West Valley out in Glendale for an arena, and they've had all kinds of ownership issues. They're trying to get another arena in the East Valley. God only knows what that'll ever happen. But if I had to say right now, two of the worst franchises, I would put the Clippers first and then the Arizona Coyotes easily second. And then we'll leave it for everybody else to formulate their own opinion.
Well,
Onward.
let me add some points to this really quickly.
Sure.
Because I'm not going to take anything away from what Kawhi Leonard has accomplished in his career. I believe he's a future Hall of Famer too. Right. But in Game 7, you have to show up. And he did not show up in that game. A total of 14 points, only 2 points in the second half. And that's not the Kawhi Leonard that I know. And when you bring up the Doc Rivers point, and this really pains me to say this, it makes me really now question how great of a coach is Doc Rivers. Scott, that is the third time that Doc Rivers has blown a 3-1 lead in the postseason. The first came in 2003 when he was the head coach of the Orlando Magic, and he had a young Tracy McGrady who had a very famous quote. And I know you remember this series because they were playing against the Detroit Pistons in the first round of the full season.
And guess what? I was in Orlando when they played in that series, and I saw those games out there. So, yeah, I lived it. But go ahead. Continue on.
And Tracy McGrady was quoted saying after one of those games, it's going to be great to play in the second round. What ends up happening? The Detroit Pistons go on to win 3 straight games and knock them out of the playoffs. Let's go to 2015, shall we?
Hold on. Before you do, okay, you know who the coach of that franchise was for the Pistons?
Rick Carlisle.
Thank you. Continue.
Okay, let's go to 2015. The Clippers are coming off of an emotional 7-game first-round series with the San Antonio Spurs where they actually beat the Spurs. The Spurs ended up being the 7th seed that year just because the West was so stacked in 2015, very similar to how it is now. But Chris Paul ends up injuring his hamstring in that Game 7, and he can't play in the first 2 games of that series. But the Clippers, being led by Blake Griffin, who was putting his dominance on full display, going down low and banging in the post, and this is why I absolutely hate what people think about analytics and how Daryl Morey has come in and pushed that narrative in this game. But they were getting the job done, and they were up 3-1 in that series, and it looked like they were going to advance to the Western Conference Finals. And had they done that, I'm willing to go a step further and say they would have advanced to the NBA Finals because the Golden State Warriors were not the Golden State Warriors that they ultimately became yet. They had just lost to the Clippers in the first round of the playoffs the year before that, and they really weren't sure if they could beat them in the postseason then. So if the Clippers and Warriors end up meeting in the Western Conference Finals in 2015, I'm picking the Clippers to win that series. But it doesn't matter because that didn't end up happening anyway. The Clippers went on to lose 3 straight games, including a Game 6 that was in their house where they were up by double digits in the fourth quarter to have the comeback of the Houston Rockets being led not by James Harden, not by Dwight Howard, but by Josh Smith, who was a role player on that team that they picked up late in the season. And, of course, the epic collapse that happened the other night. And when I look at Doc Rivers' postseason coaching record when he doesn't have Kevin Garnett, it's not very good. So it really makes me question how great of a coach is Doc Rivers really. He's a great man. He's a great leader. But as far as him being a great coach right now, I don't know. I believe he's a good coach. Do I believe he's a great coach? I don't know about that right now. Because one of the things that really upset me about this series, he let them continue to go out there and play the way that they were playing without looking like he was making any sort of adjustments to the game plan.
Yeah, but I'll say this about Doc Rivers. We can say what type of coach we think he is, but he does have an NBA championship, so I got to give him at least that much. It's funny how you talk about Josh Smith. You know what I read earlier in the week? that the Detroit Pistons owed him some money, and they finally made their final payment in June. So it wasn't quite the Bobby Bonilla deal, but he got paid 6 years after the fact. You're talking about one of the worst trades you could ever make.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear that about the Pistons, because after 2008, when they traded Chauncey Billups, that whole thing.
We're not even going to go there, and I'll tell you why. That was just they had a bad little run. They haven't had a run like some of these other teams that never even made it to the conference final, let alone the finals.
Oh, yes.
It's okay for other teams to have tough runs over a period of time because of circumstances, management, new ownership change, but not futility that lasts 3 to 4 or 5 decades. No way. I'm not even going to go there. But my point, so now we'll talk about the Rockets for just a moment, okay? Yeah, and I didn't plan on talking about this, but now that you brought up the Rockets, we will do it now. Mike D'Antoni does step down. Where do you think he lands, and who do you think Houston's going to hire?
Well, surprisingly enough, Philadelphia is interested in him. I don't know what his interest is in them. I really thought Philadelphia was going to try to go in a different direction here. I don't know how Mike D'Antoni's system is going to work with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. There's still a part of me that believes that one of those stars is not going to be back next season. I don't trust everything that front offices tell us right now during these times of the year, because, of course, they just want us to keep our mouths shut without giving out too much information. But I'm just having issues right now seeing how Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are even working together as a tandem. And if you want to get a coach in there that's going to work with them, I don't even know who the guy would be for that, but I don't think it would be Mike D'Antoni. The Indiana Pacers job, it could be very intriguing for him, but it depends on really what's going to happen with that Victor Oladipo situation. His name could possibly be brought up in trade rumors and conversations this offseason too. He's coming back from an injury, but he really looked a step slower down there in the NBA bubble. He didn't look like the Victor Oladipo that he was 2 years ago in the postseason against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers in that first-round series. So that may be a good concern for them too. It should be noted that Chauncey Billups is also a candidate for that position as well. But as far as Mike D'Antoni goes, those are one of the only two situations I can see him going to right now. I don't see anybody else being in desperate need of a coach right now because, as we know, the Clippers aren't going to fire Doc Rivers. They already came out with an announcement a few days ago.
Yeah, but for some crazy reason, and again, it's only a crazy reason, okay? I think D'Antoni would be an interesting fit with the Sixers, and I'll tell you why. The Sixers might be thinking you have an offensive mind that could salvage the relationship between Embiid and Simmons, so it might be worth taking a shot for a couple of years. That's just a gut feeling. Now, I hear in Houston, and I'd love to see this one happen, Sam Cassell being a first-time head coach with the Rockets where he had success. Now, in Indiana, well, Chauncey Billups might be an inexpensive option. He certainly knows how to play defense. He knows how to run a team. But so, and again, there are some other good candidates out there. Tyronn Lue's waiting out there, too. I know he'll have an opportunity to find a good job. And Nate McMillan could land somewhere. I don't know where, but again, we'll find out later on. And now that the Clippers are out of the playoffs, some of their assistants could be viewed at as alternatives as well. But I was just kind of curious. You brought up the Rockets, so I thought I'd bring that up. So let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, okay? The Milwaukee Bucks, everybody thought they would still be playing. But all of a sudden, Giannis Antetokounmpo didn't play up to his standards either. He does win he has a 2-time MVP now. He won his second in a row. And he says he's committed to playing with the Milwaukee Bucks. But you know what? He's got a max contract floating out there that could be worth as much as $280 million. Giannis, if you're so committed to staying in Milwaukee, I'll give you some good advice, okay? Sign the max deal at $280 million because I understand the 4-year deal is probably worth about $80 million less. And if you're committed to that area, it's a beautiful area. And, of course, I might be a little biased toward it because now I have a history there and a long history moving forward and a pretty good one back. I think that's a great fit for him. But Lazarus have already indicated that they'd be willing to go ahead and spend above the luxury tax threshold as well. Do I think Mike Budenholzer's, I don't know, time will tell. I'm not so sure I would go ahead and write him off right away. If they can find another marquee player to pair with him, fine. I hear the Chris Paul thing is nothing more than a rumor. I don't put any wheels on that one. But if Giannis is so committed to staying with Milwaukee, sign the max contract. Keep your mouth shut. Don't leave everybody guessing for a year. and go out there and focus on doing the best you can of building a legacy in Milwaukee, a franchise that hasn't been in the NBA Finals since 1974, hasn't won a championship since 1971, but a guy by the name of Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, won it. Another long drought. At least the Bucks have had a decent history of winning, unlike the L.A. Clippers or Chokers or whatever hell you want to call them.
Well, just a couple of things I'll say to this right here. When it comes down to this Giannis situation, if he doesn't sign the max, we know what the Bucks should do. The question is, do the Bucks know what they should do? The Cleveland Cavaliers have given you the blueprint to what you need to do if he does not sign that max contract. Now, him having a lunch with one of the team owners, Lasery, after just a few days after they were eliminated from the postseason, I believe that's actually a positive sign. They're having conversations on what they can do to better the franchise moving forward and the pieces that they need to put around him. You say you don't put as much stock into the Chris Paul thing. I do, because I can already see right now Oklahoma City is going into a full rebuild. And I knew that was going to happen anyway. Once Billy Donovan was fired, I said, okay, yeah, they're finally just going to hit the clock on this thing and hit restart on it. Maybe it's Chris Paul. Maybe it's even possibly Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a young point guard who could come in and help them. I don't know that yet for a fact. I would lean more towards Chris Paul because he can do more of the things that Malcolm Brogdon can do, who is a point guard that the Bucks never should have let go of, by the way. They let him go in favor of Eric Bledsoe. So when you talk about how people expected for the Bucks to still be playing, I'm not one of those people. When I looked at that Miami Heat team and I looked at them having a guy like Jimmy Butler helping them lead the way, and it wasn't the type of similar problems that he had later in Chicago, throughout Minnesota, and in that 1 year that he had in Philadelphia, because it's the Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra-led culture that they built it. They love guys like that. Bam Adebayo is coming to his own. Goran Dragic has always been a constant piece with that team since he's been there. You got these young players like Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero who have come into their own too. I knew the Bucks were going to be in trouble because people are looking at the Bucks from this standpoint here. Well, they were the number one seed in the East last year as well, and they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's not the same team. They weren't as deep this year as they were last year. Right. And I started to see the problems with the Milwaukee Bucks back in March before the season was suspended due to the pandemic.
Yeah, and you're leading me to that point. The Bucks did not look good when the hiatus took place. They didn't look very good after the restart. They struggled during the final 8 games of the regular season, and then they obviously, that poor play carried into the playoffs, and guess what? They're home until the end of the year. So I'm with you. I'm not going to downplay the Miami Heat. We're going to get to that in a moment. But the Bucks were not playing good basketball when COVID-19 sent everything into a tizzy. And then when they came back, they didn't look like a shell of themselves as they did during the regular season. I'm going to tell you right now, just because you have a great regular season record, I don't care what sport you're in, doesn't mean you're going to necessarily win the whole darn thing anyways. And the Bucks, to me, stumbled later, and they stumbled when they came back, and they were no longer a fear threat. Remember, just because you have a great record in the regular season, teams, when you get to the playoffs, how many times have you seen a team dominate in the regular season but then get beaten in the playoffs? I've seen it many, many times.
Oh, many times.
And I remember back to my days covering the Reds.
And the teams that stand out in particular to me are the teams I just compared this to. Those LeBron James, Cleveland Cavaliers-led teams in 2008, 2009, and 2010.
Well, here, I'll take it a step further. During the Bad Boys era, I remember when the New Jersey Nets dominated the Pistons during the regular season. But you never know if a team's coming back on the back end of a road trip. And the Pistons blew them out. They swept them, and I think they made quick work of the Nets. And again, there's a lot of other examples of this. That was just one that hit me a little bit closer. But as far as the Milwaukee Bucks are concerned, I still don't think they're going to go after Chris Paul. I don't know why. He's an expensive option at an older age. And you don't know when he could break down. I'm not saying it can't happen, but my gut feeling says no. And again, you know what? I was wrong last night when you and I made predictions on the Cleveland Browns-Cincinnati Bengals game where you took Cleveland, I took Cincinnati. So, yes, I can be wrong. I have no problem. I can own up to it. But for some reason, I don't see a fit with Chris Paul in Milwaukee. Again, if there is, we'll be talking about that, I guarantee you, on the Real and the Rare Sports Exchange or wherever we do it.
Well, here's one thing I would like to see if that trade does indeed happen. If it's a trade that ends up happening there and maybe not some type of buyout agreement with Chris Paul and the Oklahoma City Thunder, I would like to see Danilo Gallinari also attached to that trade because he's a sharpshooter and he plays defense, and he would come in and he would provide some things for that Bucks team that Ersan Ilyasova was providing for them last season that he can't provide this year just because he's a veteran and he's up in age, and they couldn't even play him this year. They're playing Marvin Williams over him, and I really wasn't even still sure Marvin Williams could play on the NBA level and still give you productive types of minutes. Now, he was for the time that he was out there on the floor, but if the Chris Paul trade does happen, I would like to see Danilo Gallinari attached to that trade because he could be a key role player on that team if that does indeed happen.
For some crazy reason, and this is a crazy reason, so take it for whatever it's worth, okay? And that's this. I do believe that the Bucks said that if Giannis leaves, we're not trading him away. You're going to leave on your own. And I believe that they will definitely follow through. I wouldn't trade him. You know what? And then who knows if you'll get the return. You know what? If you're going to lose them, just lose them outright, save the cash, and then begin to decide what direction you want to go. Don't trade them for guys that you may think, because then you think about what happened back in '74. You know, when they traded Jabbar, I think Bob Dandridge was involved with that trade. I don't remember the other particulars. Didn't do anything for the Bucks back then, and I think that if he's going to leave, let him go on his own. Keep the cash in your pocket, reinvest it somewhere, but know full well in the back of your mind you might have a slight rebuild because there are a lot of other players that could come a lot cheaper depending on what COVID-19 does, and as the salary cap, you know, gets readjusted. Bear in mind, it would be to Antetokounmpo's benefit. Okay, COVID-19. Stay in Milwaukee, take the cash while it's offered to you. That's a good business decision in a small market for a small market team that appreciates you, wants you, and will give you a statue. That would be the wisest thing. If indeed, you're Giannis, you are committed, actions speak louder than words, okay? And that's all there is to it. Sign the darn contract, the max that you have. That's what I would do. We'll see what happens. But no,
well, here's one thing I would have also liked to hear him spoken more about when he spoke on that point. I would have liked to hear him say, I would love to stay in Milwaukee, but we have to get better. The team around me has continued to get better. Whether that could be an open-ended comment. And the reason I say that is because he could be speaking about the guys that are currently on that roster with him now, or he could be speaking about moves that the ownership and the front office needs to make without actually throwing anybody under the bus by saying something like that. Because that's the thing. I understand why you said they shouldn't trade Giannis. He's a superstar, no doubt about it. Now back-to-back defending two-time MVP.
Right.
But they say that they're willing to go into the luxury tax. How far are you willing to go do everything that this guy wants you to do with this team? Because once again, we have a blueprint here that goes back to 2010 with the Cleveland Cavaliers not willing to make the moves that they needed to make to keep LeBron James. All they had to do was include J.J. Hickson in a trade package that would have got Amari Stoudemire to Cleveland in 2010. And as deep as that Boston Celtics team was, if you have Amari Stoudemire and LeBron James, you're at least going to the NBA Finals that season.
Yeah, but I don't want to hear all this talk about make the team better around them. Let's just talk about a guy here for a minute, all right? Hear me out. Who went 4 for 12 at the free throw line in Game 1 and then committed a costly foul in Game 2. I don't want to hear this stuff. Not so much from you, but just in general, and NBA people don't want to hear it. I really don't. Because after all, think about this for a second, okay? Be honest, you want good players around you, you have to perform when it's on the line. You've got to be the superstar player that carries your team over the hump, if indeed you are the man, so to speak. You follow me? So I understand you got to surround, but come on, Giannis, step up at crunch time. I'm sick and tired of what you need around you. You need to do everything you can to improve your darn game, and hopefully management will get the hint. It's not that they don't want to win. They're trying everything in their power to do that. Okay, they are. But don't tell me that you didn't disappear at crunch time, much less the fact that when you were sidelined with an ankle injury, they won a game without you, because they did. And again, they did win one after he got hurt. But that team showed a lot of heart. The guy that has to play better with that team is Chris Middleton, as well as some of the other players around him. Now, do I think that Mike Budenholzer is the answer? I don't know. I know I like Billy Donovan landing someplace in a winning situation. But is there a coach out there that you can sit here and tell me that when the Pistons let Rick Carlisle go, that you had a Larry Brown waiting in the wings to win a championship, even though I think Carlisle could have won with that team. And Tayshaun Prince is coming into his own, only to turn out to be one of the better defensive players ever, with a great nucleus. Remember, Grant Hill said, I can't win with this team with the Pistons. Guess what happened? They shipped him to Orlando. They got Ben Wallace, Chucky Atkins. They parlayed Atkins, ultimately got Corliss Williamson. And what do you have? An NBA championship. Who do you have it against? The Los Angeles Lakers. So all these superstars say, I can't win with this team. Don't give me a break. I don't want to hear it. Okay.
Well, I definitely understand what you're saying right there. Let me say this as well. Giannis definitely has to continue to work on his game and get better too. You need to continue to work on your strengths as well. Giannis, mid-range, in the paint, free throws. Don't worry so much about shooting these threes. Every time I would see Giannis shooting a three-pointer, it would irk my nerves because I'm like, that's not part of your game. That's not what you do. You may be able to hit one or two of them every once in a while, but you are at your best when you are down low, wreaking havoc in the paint, destroying the boards, and just being a man amongst boys down there. And, this goes back to that whole analytics conversation. Like, I would like to see our superstars in the league go back to doing what it is that they do best. Don't focus so much on shooting threes because the analytics tell you that that's what's best. Scott, I don't know about you, but I still believe in that whole mentality of you can play or you can't play. And if you can play, get out here and play. If not, get over here on the bench.
Well, I believe the real three-point play is drive to the basket and get fouled. That's the game I was brought up on. That's the one that the bad boys and every darn physical team out there went ahead and played that thing called defense. If you want to play and hit a bunch of shots out there, play on the damn streets, not in front of an arena with no fans or a lot of fans. And let me go back to D'Antoni. You know why he really left the Houston Rockets? He felt underappreciated there. He sat there, I'll go ahead and play with a small ball. But meanwhile, the owner is telling more, you can find me another coach. I don't know anything about a coach, but boy, I know how to run a guy out of town. Anybody that feels disrespected, unappreciated. So I don't want to hear all this garbage. Giannis Antetokounmpo could take a few free threes here and there, but there's nothing wrong with that old conventional three-point play. Have the point guard give it to the big man, and where does he hit it? Off the backboard end, slam dunk, three-point play. Boy, that does work. And guess what? At last I heard, it's a high percentage shot. You and I have gone on many times that the new NBA to me absolutely stinks. I think it's unwatchable. I'm tired of guys who can't go ahead and they have to pair up with other guys, okay, instead of guys being built with a key trait to finish the job. But that's for another reel in the rare, not this one. Okay, we talk about big choke jobs. The Clippers have one. The Rockets did one because they gambled on small ball and they lost, okay, after the Lakers made an adjustment. You got that one right, too. I thought the Rockets were going to get swept. You said, no, it'll happen in 5, okay? But it doesn't matter. They were out quick anyways. The Bucks, same old true. A lot of hype. We thought that the old Bucks, Lakers, let's turn the clock back to the 1970s. Didn't quite happen. So what do we have now? We have a potential matchup that I got to tell you a funny story back many years ago. I actually saw the Miami Heat play the Los Angeles Lakers over at the old Forum. I think Glenn Rice was on that team when the Wolverines were playing in the Rose Bowl against Washington, the University of Washington. It was pretty interesting to see a Heat game at the old Forum in Inglewood. But meanwhile, you got LeBron potentially facing his old team with the Heat. So I think that, let's face the reality. The Miami Heat, you're right. Let's go back to what you're saying with them. Okay, they swept, I believe, Indiana, right? Goodbye, Nate Millen. Okay, they beat the Milwaukee Bucks when the Bucks were regarded one of the better teams out there. And now Mike Budenholzer and Giannis is having a meeting with the owner. Well, what are we going to do here to get better? And now you got them playing against the Boston Celtics, okay, down 2-0. And then they have a little bit of a flare-up in the locker room. So it seems like the Miami Heat are making I think Tylenol's getting a heavy workout with all the headaches that they're causing people, because you're right. Jimmy Butler, to me, okay, is the most underrated player in basketball. There's a guy that performed well in Chicago. All he did was want to win. Maybe he got ruffled a few feathers in Minnesota. Guess what? All the guy wanted to win. Okay, goes to Philadelphia. The Philadelphia 76ers not anywhere. There's a reason. Goes to Miami, idolizes Pat Riley, buys into Eric Spoelstra. I'll bet you that right now that Jimmy Butler thinks, hey, Pat Riley, I wouldn't mind if your name was my daddy instead on my birth certificate because I idolize the living heck out of you. You can appreciate the way I am, And guess what? He's being accepted. And, of course, it doesn't hurt to play in a state with no state income tax either, but that's another tax thing for another day. But, yeah, I think Jimmy Butler's he's an MVP in a lot of different ways, the most underrated player in basketball. So, yeah, the Miami Heat have done unbelievable. And you know what? The only problem with the Miami Heat here is they play in downtown Miami. They're so far away, it's hard for me to get there. But you know what? They've been the most consistent winner in South Florida. The Dolphins haven't done anything in quite a few years. They haven't won a championship since the 70s, and they've had a tough stretch in recent years. The Florida Panthers have not done very well either. They've only made one NHL Finals appearance, and the Miami Marlins, take it for whatever it's worth, even though they haven't had the biggest winning tradition, somehow they've managed to win a couple world titles, and they've had some ownership fire sales. But the Miami Heat are quietly the most consistent winning franchise in this market, Southern Florida. But, yeah, I think the Miami Heat is a great story. And I'll tell you what, if the Miami Heat were to take on LeBron James, it would remind me a lot of 2004 when the underdog Pistons shocked the Lakers with Shaquille O'Neal and Chauncey Billups. I think that he could conceivably upset the Lakers should this matchup occur, and it's very possible it could. But I'll tell you what, we talked about this before. I'm so proud of the Denver Nuggets. I have never rooted so hard for the Denver Nuggets to knock out the loudmouth Clippers. They were. Everybody's talking about the Clippers and the Lakers. Punch your ticket to the finals and all deal. Michael Malone upset that family's not being invited. Understood why. Good point. Everybody else allowed to have family. But you know what? Who's got the last laugh right now, Xavier? Michael Malone. He's still in the bubble. Well, another one bubble burst with all the injustice movements that they wanted to quit in the first place. But the Denver Nuggets are a feel-good story. They've never been to an NBA Finals either. I'll give you another history lesson, okay? When they merged with from the NBA, Herb Brown was the Pistons head coach. Larry Brown was the head coach. You had Dan Issel there, pretty good. And you have Doug English, and they had a lot of great players that have gone through the history of the Nuggets. So, I would love to see the Denver Nuggets, get to the finals for the first time. And they had to earn it against the Clippers, but they grinded it out. They kept their mouth shut. They played hard. They made their coach proud, and they made the city of Denver proud. So if there's a sentimental favorite and what we consider a not so normal, unprecedented year, I'd love to see the Denver Nuggets win it all. Do I think they will? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, LeBron James is taking notice that we better take this team seriously. We thought we were supposed to play the Clippers, and I can guarantee you one thing in this series here, that the LA Lakers will not treat the Denver Nuggets like Rodney Dangerfield. They will give them respect.
Well, let me go back to a lot of what you said there, because you said a lot. So let me go back on a few points.
Don't I generally say a lot?
You do.
Okay,
so let me go back. Let me go back to one thing in particular, the Jimmy Butler and Minnesota point. Maybe he ruffled a few feathers there. I don't care about Jimmy Butler ruffling feathers in Minnesota. The Minnesota Timberwolves had not been to the playoffs for 14 consecutive years before Jimmy Butler showed up. The last time the Minnesota Timberwolves were in the playoffs, Kevin Garnett was hoisting up his lone NBA Most Valuable Player award that he won during the 2003-2004 season. That was it. So I don't care about anybody in that organization being upset about any feathers being ruffled by anything Jimmy Butler had to say. Number two, the Philadelphia 76ers. You talk about that organization and them putting more stock into being more focused on wanting to keep Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler because he didn't necessarily get along with everybody in the locker room. Well, how do you think they feel about that move today? Because if you have Jimmy Butler on this team as opposed to Tobias Harris, maybe it's the Philadelphia 76ers that we're talking about right now and not the Miami Heat.
Good points.
Playing in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. Because, I mean, if the Philadelphia 76ers make the Eastern Conference Finals last year, I believe they also would have defeated the Milwaukee Bucks because they had the defensive horses to run with them. And Jimmy Butler would have also given Giannis a hard time, just like Kawhi Leonard did. So, just some stop to those organizations right there. As far as the Chicago Bulls go, yeah, they should have kept him and rebuilt around him too, but they were probably ready to just have a total rebuild overall anyway, because everything from that Tom Thibodeau, Derrick Rose era had pretty much just collapsed itself all the way in. And when they tried to make one last run at it with Rondo and Dwayne Wade, those guys being older, it didn't work out the way they thought it was going to work out. So they probably just felt the need to hit reset right there.
Well, I'll say this about Jimmy Butler. He may never get a statue outside of that arena down in Miami. But I guarantee you one thing he'll have in common with Alonzo Mourning and Dwayne Wade, his number will get retired. And the Miami Heat didn't fear the deer. If anything, okay, they scorched the deer. And in a broadcast filled with lots of one-liners, okay, with me initially starting the broadcast with me eating some nuggets, okay, and then Denver Nuggets, still playing basketball. We aren't lacking one-liners in this broadcast, but we're also got a lot of information. Just so you know, you're watching and listening to The Real and Rare. My name is Scott Morgan, around the Motor City Madmouth, along with the X-Man X, Xavier McKnight. We do this a couple times a month, but Xavier McKnight does appear with me on the other broadcasts throughout. So we're having a good NBA discussion here. And if you're looking for two guys that really want to bash the LA Clippers, that's us tonight. Are we doing a little Bucks smashing? That's us tonight. Are we doing a little bit of Nuggets rooting? That's us tonight. Are we doing a little Miami Heat rooting? Perhaps it's us tonight. Depends on how you look at it. We still and bear in mind, right now the Miami Heat do own a 2-0 lead over the Boston Celtics in their Eastern Conference Final. And I believe in the West, you've got the Lakers and the Nuggets due to start real soon. Is it tonight?
Yes, they'll be tipping off in less than an hour. And that'll lead me into where I'm going with this conversation now.
Sure.
I am a Lakers fan. So, of course, I want the Lakers to win this series. But if the Denver Nuggets do win this series, it's not going to overly upset me. Because as I said yesterday on the Sports Exchange, I appreciate teams in sports that play the game the right way. The Denver Nuggets play the game the right way. They play hard, they play defense, they don't give up on possessions, and they don't back down. Here's the interesting thing about the Denver Nuggets in that series against the LA Clippers where things really could have been imploded, and they actually ended up coming together. It's after Game 4, Scott, and Michael Porter Jr. is at the podium, and he's basically saying, I could have got more touches. Jokic and Jamal, they're great players, but you can't just run the offense through them. We know that young man shouldn't have said that. We know that if he had a problem with the way that Mike Malone was running the rotation or who all was touching the ball, he should have went and he should have addressed that with him privately. But that was a moment that could have made that team totally implode by him coming out and publicly doing something like that. And it didn't happen. They rallied together. And he came out in Game 5 and he had some of the key plays down the stretch. A key 3 that he hit late in that fourth quarter of that Game 5, and a key defensive play that he made in Game 5 that helped seal the win as well. So that just goes to tell you how resilient and how mature that team is as well. And that's a credit to Mike Malone and the job that he and that coaching staff has done as well.
Yes, sir.
And let's go back to the Denver Nuggets and LA Lakers matchup really quickly, because here's something I want Lakers Nation to understand. This isn't 2009. This isn't Carmelo versus Kobe. This is not those undermanned Nuggets going up against a deeper Lakers team. No, the Lakers are going to have some problems in this series. I'm picking the Lakers to win this series in 7, but I'm picking the Nuggets to win this game tonight, just simply because when it comes down to LeBron James-led teams, and I've said this before, they usually use these game ones against superior talented teams as fill-out games to try to get a feel of how they think the series is going to go. He did it against the Houston Rockets. Now, I'm not surprised he distinguished them the way that he did. He and Anthony Davis and that Rajon Rondo, who deserves major props for how he has come back and played in the postseason as well. But the Nuggets are going to be different. They're well coached, and they have two potential superstars, I should say, and a third young player on that team who very well could become a superstar as well. But they also have savvy veterans like Will Barton and Gary Harris and Paul Millsap and Jeremy Grant and guys like that. They have a complete basketball team. They play the game the right way. They don't take possessions off. And I'm not going to say that I'm rooting for the Denver Nuggets because I am an LA Lakers fan, but if they do make it to the NBA Finals, it's not going to overly upset me because at least I know that I'm going to have at least one team. And if it's the Miami Heat, both teams that are going to come in and play the game the way that it should be played.
Yeah. First of all, I don't give lottery advice, but maybe for those individuals that want a little, you're looking for a 3-digit number, take 410. That number is the winning percentage for the LA Clippers, 410 winning percentage. Now, just a little hypothetical in case you get in the mood to go out there and take $1 out of your pocket and see where that George Washington takes you. And if you bother to win, okay, don't let me know about it. Otherwise, I'll be pulling my hair out. Then again, I don't have any hair to pull out, but that's beside the point with the haircut. Now, as far as that series is concerned, I could see this one going 7. But the one thing we can't lose sight of here is that Denver Nuggets are not only underdogs, Xavier, but they're on house money. Nobody expected this team to get here. Nobody expected this team to get here. Remember, it was the LA series. The 2 LA teams are going to cancel because of the old racial injustice. And guess what? The Clippers went home. But I could see this going 7. I think the Lakers are going to prevail in 7. I do. But you know what? The Denver Nuggets are on house money. They are. Michael Malone got everybody to root for him. God, I feel bad for you, Mike. The family's not here with me. But you know what? Any way to motivate yourself psychologically, whatever makes you feel better, so be it. But I have a feeling that the NBA will probably a little bit more family in here for this series anyways. But you know what? I think the NBA ratings will be good no matter who you have in there. Denver, a first-time participant in the NBA Finals, if they get there, or the Lakers, they draw. And you know full well that if you have a Lakers-Celtics, it's like many, many years ago, I used to think that if you had the Dodgers and the Yankees in MLB, that would be a great matchup. But time will tell if that one happens. Or you get the Lakers and the Miami Heat, Pat Riley team against his old team. A lot of very parallel storylines. So
it definitely is. And one thing I'll say right here, if the Lakers and the Miami Heat meet in the NBA Finals and the Miami Heat defeat the Los Angeles Lakers, I believe Pat Riley will finally retire from the Miami Heat organization.
No way.
I'll tell you why I feel that way. I feel that way because he will have done what he actually set out to do after LeBron James left, and that was to take him off his throne.
No way. No way. He'll stay there as long as he wants to stay there. The owner will keep him on the payroll, give him a spot up there just to give a little advice. Show up. A guy like Riley's a lifer. Come on, Xavier. If you're a lifer, you're in the cotton picking gym. Spoelstra's doing all the coaching. You're giving advice. Come on, Pat Riley's got the best job on the planet. Really?
Well, he definitely does, and I want.
He ain't retiring, Xavier. Sorry, bro. I'm a little hyper tonight.
Possible. I want to see him continue for as many years as possible.
But he ain't retiring. Give me that break.
One thing I could potentially see.
Give me what you're dealing in the kitchen, okay? It's okay to get animated. Now they can see us get animated. Come on. Pat Riley's not retiring. I'll be wrong about my Browns prediction. I'll be wrong about the fact that you had the Houston Lakers series in five. But I'm not going to be wrong about this one. I've been around this game a lot longer than you have, okay? Remember that. Okay.
Well, here's one thing I want to say, and I know this is a basketball-related show, but I want to go back to that Browns and Bengals game last night.
Sure.
You may have been wrong about who you thought was going to win that game.
Yeah.
But Joe Burrow looked awfully impressive.
Didn't he? Yeah, that's true. I was wrong about the score. Okay, but yeah, I think Joe Burrow's a stud. I really do. I mean, nobody ever thought it'd be 35-30. I think when we predicted, our scores were in the 20s and the teens. But yeah, Joe Burrow's going to be a good quarterback. So, but come on, teacher versus a pupil, right? Would you say that I'm the teacher, you're the pupil?
Of course.
Okay, well, good. My son, okay, my pupil, Pat Riley's not retiring. But don't think it would be a going away present that Miami would end up beating the Lakers. And remember, he's the one who was the architect of Showtime and went along with it when he took over for Paul Westhead and Magic Johnson. So, but Jimmy Butler, to me, against LeBron James is worth watching in its own right. Jimmy Butler knows how to get in people's heads. This guy here is and again, you can't underestimate this Miami team because they remind me a little bit of the 2004 Pistons, okay? I don't know if they have a real glaring superstar, although Jimmy Butler might be the closest thing to it. But what Pat Riley has done is he's assembled a team right there where you have a lot of great players with one guy that can conceivably step up. And the model that Joe Dumars did under Larry Brown, where it'll be a collective effort that wins it, even though Jimmy Butler may be the one guy of that group that to me is the best, the superstar of that particular group. But I think that team, they're the most underrated coach on the planet, Eric Spoelstra, is indeed the epitome of a team. It'll be fun to watch.
Here's one thing I want to say, just one more thing about that Miami Heat team, and not Jimmy Butler, but Bam Adebayo. Scott, when he was named an All-Star this year, and I was looking at his numbers as opposed to some of the other players who were snubbed, I was like, yeah, this isn't right. But I was doing that based off of statistics and not actually watching the games for myself. I wasn't watching a lot of Miami Heat basketball necessarily during the regular season. Since they've been in the bubble, I've been watching a lot of it, and I'm just watching Bam Adebayo, and I'm just like, my goodness, this guy's a stud.
Well, I don't know. I've never heard of Bam Adebayo before until I started watching the NBA playoffs. So, again, I don't do a lot with the NBA. You're probably the closest person I have to a real basketball guru. Glad we have somebody here that pays attention to it. No disrespect against the NBA. For many, many years when I was living in Detroit, I covered it. And when the Pistons were regular visitors against Miami here downtown, I went to a lot of games and saw Dwayne Wade and could appreciate the effort he had. Nowadays, unfortunately, I just have to spread myself around the sporting world. I don't have time to really focus on the NBA like I used to. Bear in mind, though, when I was in Detroit, I had a season pass, parking pass, and all that. And I was at the Palace all the time. I practically lived there in the Silverdome. And once in a while, I made it to Joe Louis and Tiger Stadium. But the reason why I practically lived over at the Palace and the Silverdome is being Oak County, Michigan resident. I enjoyed the suburbs better. That's no disrespect to the teams that played downtown, but that's where George Eichhorn spent a lot of his time downtown, but that's a different story. But I think either way, you're going to have a lot of interesting storylines, and I'm sure that as the NBA playoffs continue, we might be doing the next few shows focusing around basketball to keep our viewers/listeners up to date about what's going on. It'll be a very interesting finish for sure. So, with that said, you are listening to The Real and Rare. My name is Scott Morgenroth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with Xavier McKnight. Am I animated tonight? Yes. Am I going to tell you right now? Get used to it, because as long as we're visual, I'm going to make sure I'm loud and I'm visual and I'm very clear. I may not always be right, but I'm going to be all that. I will also point out tonight that earlier in the week, I want to pay my deepest respects to the Shepik family. Jill Shepik passed away at the age of 73 due to Alzheimer's disease, tough disease, Alzheimer's. And again, my deepest condolences go out to her husband, Wayne. They were married 51 years. They had two beautiful children. I wouldn't say children, but they're, Dawn Shepik, who's married to Rob, and Todd Shepik, my brother-in-law, married to my sister-in-law, Marie. And of course, I take a lot of pride in my nephew, Peter, just a 2-year-old kid, who unfortunately for little Pete will never have spent time with either of his grandmothers. My original mother-in-law, Betty Ebling, passed away a couple of years, so she never lived to see Peter. And now, of course, little Pete's not going to spend time with his new grandmother all of 2 years. So I want to pay my deepest respects. Rest in peace, Jill Shepik. It'll always be in my heart, my mind. She was at my wedding with Candy and helped us put that together. Spent a lot of holidays with Jill and Wayne, Todd, Marie, Dawn, the rest of the clan, and rest in peace. At least I know, Jill, you're not suffering at all. You're in a better place, and nobody wishes death upon anybody. We can't lose sight of the fact that we're only here for a visit anyways, okay? Sometimes people's visits are longer than others. We can't control the way God has his fate toward us. And, Jill, God bless. And I also want to give a shout out to my own mom, too. She's dealing with some health issues now, but I'll tell you, I have never seen a bigger warrior than my mom. She's dealing with some COPD issues, but you want to talk about a spunky woman who's got a personality like fire. My mother definitely is a warrior in every sense of the word. So, and what we do is sports is about warriors. Sometimes, the people that are not on the court are the ones off the court that mold us. I want to also point out another thing. If you haven't had a chance to watch a recent edition of No Limits, this one here, we have a tribute to mothers, and I'm going to be doing another broadcast on Tuesday night on No Limits called A Tribute to Fathers. So I encourage you, those that go to the website, to listen to the mothers broadcast as well as a lot of the other ones, especially that one. We all have them. We got here somehow, and the Father's edition will be coming out as well. So we didn't need Mother's Day and Father's Day. We can do these things whenever we want, especially when the timing permits. It just so happens that my mother-in-law's birthday would have been this week. The timing was unfortunate that Jill passed away, so therefore we decided to do that broadcast. But good NBA stuff. I love getting loud. After all, you said we were going to dish it out in the kitchen, and I'm not making a liar out of you, Xavier McKnight, am I?
No, not at all. And let me just add on to that really quickly. Rest in peace to the lady that you spoke about there, Miss Shepik, and also continual best wishes to your mother as well. But also, I'd like to say our condolences go out to Bill Belichick and his family as well. Bill Belichick, the head coach of the New England Patriots, he lost his mother earlier this week at the age of 98. Bill is actually still coaching practices and is expected to coach in this game on Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. But we want to continue to send our best wishes and condolences to them. Now, on a happier note, I'd like to say something that I know is probably going to make you a little excited. I'd like to wish a happy birthday to Detroit Lions legend, running back Billy Sims. He's 65 years old today. For those of you who don't know, Billy was buried before Barry showed up to Detroit. Now, unfortunately, his career was cut short because of devastating knee injuries that he suffered early on in his career. But when he first arrived in Detroit, he was the man, and he's gone on to have a great career after football, being a great entrepreneur, owning over 60 barbecue businesses, I believe, around the nation. So a happy birthday to Billy Sims as well, and thank you for everything you did for the game.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I met Billy Sims a couple of times. He used to show up at the Lions every year at the Silverdome. It was great. Billy Sims tore that knee up over at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome out in Minneapolis. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not so sure it's a funny story, but I'm going to say it anyways. I'm wearing these hiking boots, and they allowed me on the sidelines, for the Lions and the Vikings. And bear in mind, back in the day when you had those dome stadiums, there was artificial surface along with cement. The Silverdome was the same way. And I ended up injuring my knee on that same place. Didn't have ACL ligaments. I had to have my knee drained after that. So anytime you get your boots caught into that turf, it hurts. That's all I can tell you. So, yeah, Billy Sims done a great job at the barbecue, a Heisman Trophy winner out of Oklahoma. I remember when Gary Danielson got hurt in 1979, and the Lions went ahead and finished 2-14. That day went down to the third quarterback, who was Jeff Comlow, a ninth-round pick out of the University of Delaware. But the prize for the Lions was Billy Sims. Now, I'll never forget this again. I know we're hitting you with the H card all night, X, man. Deal with it, okay? You and I have a few decades between us. But I'll never forget when Billy Sims made his debut. Jimmy the Greek went on CBS television. Okay, maybe you'll find on YouTube, maybe you won't. Who predicted the Rams would annihilate the Lions, because that was Billy Sims' first game out in L.A. Guess what? Billy Sims, if you look at his first game against the Rams, the Lions whipped the Rams, and Billy Sims was a star. And to think, 2-14 would lead to a guy like Billy Sims. And another Heisman Trophy winner that the Lions had many years ago was a guy by the name of Steve Owens. Boy, you're getting a history lesson tonight, aren't you, little buddy?
Definitely are. And and I want to say this last part to this as well. For those who have said for years, well, the Lions should have retired number 20 because of Barry Sanders. No. This is very similar to why the Dallas Cowboys won't retire jersey number 88 because of Michael Irvin. There was Drew Pearson that was there before him. And before Barry Sanders showed up to Detroit wearing number 20, there was Billy Sims that wore 20 before him. So if you're going to retire it for one player, you have to retire it for both players as well. Just want to share that information with everybody out there who wants to know why those two jersey numbers in particular won't be retired by those two organizations.
Yeah, no, but I should also point out another thing now that you brought that up. Chuck Hughes, I was at the only game in NFL history in 1970 who died of a heart attack on the field, and Dick Butkus was there. I'll never forget. I was like 8 years of age at the time. My dad took me over to that game, and I'm going to tell you, it was nobody cared who won and lost that game. I know the Bears did, I believe, end up winning it. But Chuck Hughes passed away. The Lions did not go ahead and circulate Chuck Hughes' number for a while. I think they ended up using it later on, and it's not the point. But they kept that number out of circulation. And I was at a game where the only NFL game in NFL history where a man died in front of me on the field. And you talk about me going to some games where, I was at the Mike Utley game, and then there was Jerry Ball had remember what happened to Jerry Ball? They had the chop block, and Reggie Brown. I was at each and all of those games, and they all ended poorly. But and I don't want to get too off subject here, but we're talking about the fact that Bill Belichick is coaching despite his mom passing away. So 98 is not a bad run, but you still hate to die anyways, and not that it's our choice. But again, I don't want to lose sight of where this all began. Jill Shepik and the rest of the Shepik and Ebling family all the way around. I love all of you guys. Rest in peace, Jill. And prayers to the family, coming from somebody who's as hard as I may be on the outside with my fiery personality, and I apologize for nothing, as Gene Hackman would say. We all have a soft side. And Xavier McKnight, as long as we had the ability to not only talk about it here, but we're visual now, and we know our show's going to go to a much higher level. I'm glad that people will see the passion that you and I have, even though we have a little bit of an age difference. Our candles still burn young, especially when we work together on more than one show on the planet. With that said, why don't you let everybody know how they get a hold of you? I'll let everybody know they'll get a hold of us, and then I'll give you the COVID message to wrap this bad boy up. All right, go ahead.
Yes, you can reach me at XTMCKNIGHII on Twitter. The two I's at the end are capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. You can send me a friend request and a follow request to Facebook and LinkedIn just by typing in Xavier McKnight. And you can find tonight's episode of The Real and the Rare and the previous 2 episodes of The Real and the Rare that Scott and I have done on my YouTube channel just by typing in Xavier McKnight.
Very good. Okay, with that said, if you want to find the audio version of this Real and the Rare, you can find it through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Let me say that again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, to get a hold of us, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook and Instagram. You can follow us there at South Florida Tribune. We have a YouTube channel. Xavier has his. We have ours, South Florida Tribune. You can view the episodes there. Again, we're building something here, folks. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. We have content and we have broadcasts on that website. We have a lot of great writers, have a lot of great media distribution partners. More importantly, all the broadcasts are there. To email us, you can go ahead and email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com, or you can connect with us, me, on LinkedIn, Scott, S-C-O-T-T, Morgan Roth, M-O-R-G-A-N-R-O-T-H. I am officially the Motor City Madmouth. Xavier McKnight, when we were on this broadcast before, I got the trademark at least for the broadcasting side. I'll be working on it for the other ones, but I have that name secured for the broadcasting side. So Xavier McKnight, what an incredible broadcast we had tonight. We covered a lot of ground. NBA, of course, is our main theme, but we can't lose sight of the people that are important to us, from the Shepiks to my mom and everybody else connected who's dealing with pain, death. We're prayers with you. We hope we've given you an opportunity to have some good entertainment and try to feel where we're coming from in our heart and our mind. So why don't you go ahead and give everybody the COVID message, and then we'll be looking forward to seeing you on the next edition of The Real and the Rare in 2 weeks. And Xavier McKnight will be appearing. The next time you'll see him here will be on our fantasy football broadcast with Ryan Schoolroom. All right, Xavier, take it away.
Yes, unfortunately, having to speak of death and sickness and all those things, COVID-19 has brought all of those things about. And even though the numbers are substantially slowing down here in Florida and also around the nation, the fact that we're still seeing cases, the fact that we're still seeing the fact that people are dying from this virus, it already tells us it's not away yet. It hasn't gone away yet. It's still a thing, and we need to continue to be vigilant and be responsible. Please wear your mask, wear your gloves, social distance, don't gather in large crowds. Let's do everything we can to take care of each other so that we can get through this thing together. Because the last time we let our guard down with this thing, we saw the large spike in numbers happen again. And with the fall coming up and that being cold and flu season, we definitely don't need to deal with cold and flu season and COVID-19 at the same time, even though it looks like we're going to have to deal with both of them at the same time to some degree. But let's not have to deal with both of them to a huge degree of where we're really worried about some things out here. So please, everyone, let's continue to be vigilant and be responsible and do the things that we need to do. And as I said last time, to everyone who is doing those things, being vigilant, being responsible, and we're doing everything we can to take care of each other, a huge shout out to us for doing that. Because like I like to say, I don't normally believe in giving people pats on the backs for doing the right thing, but in this case, we should. We have to, because we see so many knuckleheads out there who don't want to take this thing seriously. And they usually end up paying a price for doing so. So a huge shout out to all of us who are doing those things. And for those of you who are not doing those things, get in line, because this is not a game.
With that said, he's Xavier McKnight, and I believe your shirt reads what? True, right?
Yes.
And so he's Xavier McKnight, and that's true. I'm the Motor City Mad Mouth. This is true. We hope that you've enjoyed this edition of The Real and the Rare. And once again, we look forward to the next edition of The Real and the Rare. So once again, thanks a lot for joining us, everybody. And we will catch you the next time. Be safe. God bless. Great job, Xavier McKnight. But as Tony Kornheiser would say, let's see if we can do better the next time. Love Tony Kornheiser, Mike Wilbon. But again, I'll take preference to what Tony said. We'll see if we can do better the next time. Hope you've enjoyed this broadcast. Good night, everybody, and be safe.